So we're looking at inerrancy of the Gospels. For the last 3 or 4 videos we've got into specific detail about 2 texts and trying to work out why there seems to be a contradiction. What Poythress has done, he looked at Augustine, Calvin and 2 contemporary scholars. Now he's looked at the broader context of Matthew, the broader context of Luke. Okay, that's where we're at. And so then he goes on. In addition, Luke indicates that Jesus' compassion extends even to people who were not directly present in front of him. He takes the trouble to answer. In sum, Matthew and Luke have distinctive emphasis. Matthew emphasizes the centurion's Gentile status, and Luke emphasizes humility. Both of these emphases say something significant about the kingdom of God and Jesus' ministry. First, the kingdom of God will include Gentiles and all who come to Jesus in faith. Jews who do not trust in Jesus are excluded. Second, those who enter the kingdom must come in humility, recognizing that they do not deserve the benefits that God offers. Both emphases are valid, both are actually exemplified in the incident with the centurion's servant. In fact, at a deep level, the 2 emphases imply one another. If God welcomes the humble, it implies that the people do not receive God's kingdom and his salvation because of their supposed qualifications or worthiness. Therefore, Jews cannot depend on their privileged religious position. Conversely, if Jews do not enter the kingdom of God on the basis of their religious privileges, it implies that not only they but everyone else must enter into humility. In coming to God, no one may take pride in himself or his alleged worthiness. Everyone must humble himself. It is worthwhile to think about how the 2 emphases harmonize in the 2 accounts of the same episode. It is important that we respect the trustworthy character of the Gospels, but it's also valuable to acknowledge their distinctiveness. We are richer by having the 2 Gospels draw attention to distinct aspects of meaning of the events and the meaning of the kingdom of God. So basically, to cut it down, basically you got one text in Matthew says the centurion came to Jesus, and then because he was worried about his servant who was sick, and then you have the centurion's servants coming saying exactly the same word as the centurion, saying that their master is worried about this person dying. Basically, by looking at the context of Matthew, we see that the reason why Matthew puts in the centurion is trying to say something about Judaism and the Gentiles. Luke is trying to say something about humility. And because the 2 have different perspectives of what they're trying to achieve, that's where they're coming from. So what that means in reality then is was Calvin and Luther right? Was Calvin and Augustine right? Were the other contemporary scholars? What I think is that putting all this together, what Poythress says gives us a richer understanding of these texts, and we can use Augustine, we can use contemporary scholars. It seems to me that you can have it both ways. You could have it that it was, in both accounts really, it was the servants, not the centurion, who came to Jesus. But when it says centurion in Matthew, that really is his representatives. The 2 are the same in ancient culture. It could be that, or it could be there were two situations. One, the servants came to Jesus, then the centurion came to Jesus. You can have that both ways. And when you mix in the variety of emphasis on each gospel, you can understand why the writers have written the way they have. What's the practical application of this? Basically, the practical application of this is that when we see a contradiction, seemingly, sometimes those contradictions are in accord with what each writer's trying to achieve. And if you look at what the writer's trying to achieve, you then gain some insights into the text that you wouldn't normally gain. So these problematic passages actually highlight some important themes that are in each book. So don't be taken back when you come to a contradiction seemingly and think it doesn't make sense, because when you actually study the context, you'll find often that there's meaning to the contradiction or seemingly contradiction that you're seeing. Now I'm going to finish off now with a few thoughts on the book. We've gone into detail 2 passages, and now what I want to do now is just finish with 2 videos giving a review of the book. Okay,